Let me ask you whether it is correct that at no point during the summer of 2001 did you receive any notification that there was a higher danger or threat level of potential terrorists coming into the United States?
Which time frame, sir?
In the summer of '01, at the same time as this incident.
Not that I recall, sir.
And in looking back at this matter, had you received any information as to whether this individual, Mr. Catani, had actually been interviewed in connection with his visa application to obtain a visa to visit the United States?
That is negative, sir.
And that is the case that our staff has found no indication that Mr. Katami was physically interviewed by a consular officer. Well, let me ask you this. As of August '01, when this incident occurred, among the INS inspectors in Orlando, was there a recognition, sir, that greater deference would be given to a Saudi national than, say, a Mexican or a Jamaican?
Could you rephrase the question,
That
please?
you would be more permissive in admitting a Saudi rather than individuals from certain other nations?
Well, since I came in the service in 1992, the consensus of the Saudi people, they have to be treated with more tact to the nation. That's something that is not in writing. However, anytime that a new person come on board, basically that is about the feeling that is communicated by the more experienced inspectors.
And that if you hassled a Saudi citizen, or that you took more time up to the point even of permitting entry, but you gave them more attention, that you might catch some kind of negative criticism?
That is correct. Normally, matter of fact, the day that I was working on this particular incident, one of my co-workers stated to me that you are going to get in trouble because you are trying to refuse a Saudi. My answer was, I have to do my job, and I cannot use nationality as a guidance, how to do or conduct my interview or take care of my business.
Officer Melendez, let's review the factors that you considered on that day with respect to Mr. Catani. Here was a young man of 26 years of age traveling alone, whereas the vast majority of Saudi visitors to this country who depart at Orlando are in family groups.
That's correct.
Mr. Catani appeared unable to speak or understand the English language.
That's correct.
Mr. Catani was traveling on a one-way ticket and had no good explanation about where he was going once he was to depart from the United States.
That is correct.
His physical appearance was that of an individual who was very fit and perhaps had military training.
That is correct.
His attitude was strikingly unusual. He was arrogant and combative from the start, fixing you with a piercing glare, and became even more confrontational as the interview process proceeded.
That is correct, sir.
And despite his lack of facility in the English language, he had no hotel reservation and gave contradictory answers as to who was supposed to have assisted him, either immediately or within 3 days of his arrival.
That is correct, sir.
And 7, he had insufficient funds to spend 6 days as a tourist in the United States and then to purchase a return ticket to Dubai.
That is correct.
And when you asked for reasonable information about the identity of the individual who would be meeting him or assisting him, or the person whom he would contact back at home who would arrange for information to be provided about the friend who was going to lend him money, he refused to answer.
That is correct.
Your interpreter confirmed that there was something seriously suspicious about this man.
That is affirmative.
And Mr. Katami refused to answer questions once you administered an oath.
It's correct.
And on the basis of all of these factors, you concluded that Katami might well be a hitman here in the United States to do harm.
That is correct.
And yet, despite all of these factors, because you were dealing with a Saudi national, you were not certain by any means that your superiors would agree with your determination to deny entry.
That is correct.
What was the perception at that time at the INS among your colleagues as to whether the supervisors or the higher-ups would back up a line officer such as yourself under such circumstances?
Well, I think that the difference on the supervisor's decision to continue on to get higher approval, it was based on credibility. I mean, once you establish credibility with your subordinates and your superiors, and they know what you claim something is not right, is because you really indeed have the facts. You know, that's the reason that I think that did make a difference, and he went along to contact somebody else, high echelon supervisor, and sometimes I feel that if the outcome could have been the same if somebody else was making the phone call, i.e., which inspector was the one who doing the secondary inspection. That's not taking anything less from my coworkers, but whether they have persuaded the phone call, taking in consideration that he was a Saudi national.
So the presumption was against the line officer or the secondary officer determination that an individual of Saudi nationality ought to be refused entry. You had to make your case. The burden was on you.
That is correct.
Now, as we now know, with the benefit of investigations subsequent to 9/11, Mohammed Atta, perhaps the ringleader of all the terrorists here in the 9/11 plot, was at Orlando International Airport on August 4, 2001, the very day that Mohammed Katani claimed, at least in part of his interview with you, that someone was upstairs to meet him. And we know that Mohammed Atta made a telephone call from that location to a telephone number associated with the 9/11 plot. On the basis of that information, as well as significant additional information, which we are now not at liberty to discuss in public session, it is extremely possible and perhaps probable that Mohammed al-Katani was to be the 20th hijacker. Based on that premise, and taking into account that the only plane commandeered by 4 hijackers rather than 5 crashed before reaching its target, it is entirely plausible to suggest that your actions in doing your job efficiently and competently may well have contributed to saving the Capitol or the White House and all the people who were in those buildings, those monuments to our democracy, from being included in the catastrophe of 9/11. And for that, we all owe you a debt of thanks and gratitude. Let me ask you a couple of questions. We are running a bit late. With respect to your recommendations that you would make with respect to perhaps training or otherwise empowering individuals now in the Department of Homeland Security, where you are an officer, what would you recommend that the higher-ups hear from the people on the line every day doing their job?
I would like to emphasize in training. Training is extremely important. I don't know what kind of training in interview techniques are conducting at the academy at the present time because it's on the new program. But I think that the interview techniques not only should address what the person is coming to the United States, but also should include consequence and going to another line of questioning that when you feel that something is wrong, you can go that direction. I strongly feel that time should not be a factor. You know, you got to take as long as you need it to complete your job. Technology is wonderful. We have a great technology since 2001. However, the human factor got to be there. The human factor got to be there. The question have to be asked. The body language have to be checked. Because by conducting a good interview, it's a lot that you can determine. That sixth sense must come to play to make the right decision. About the round-trip tickets, I think that is something that some other countries will not take, i.e. United Kingdom. If you go to the United Kingdom without a return ticket, they will turn you right around. You won't get in the country. It's only one piece of paper that you're inadmissible. Support the supervisor's decision without fear that they are going to get in trouble. I mean, we will make some wrong decisions. I mean, that's human nature. But they have to understand, everybody in the chain of command have to understand that we have to do what we have to do. And it's better off to make a wrong decision and send somebody home that didn't have no reasons by going home than to admit somebody because we will be afraid of the letters and the congressional letters or letter from somebody and hand it the inspector and supervisors from making the right decision in some occasions. The U.S. visit, we think that is a great program. However, we have concerns about the departure portion of it. I mean, being mandated by just body machine, how can we determine that this person went home? Okay? I think that it would be a great tool. We've been talking about it for years, but by just not having that system not mandated by human beings that we can confirm, I don't think that is the right way to do it. My example for that is that when we decline or refuse somebody, we escort the person to the aircraft. We sit in the jetway until that plane pushed back to ensure that the person go home. So we should use the same principle when we use in the departure portion of the U.S. visit program. I mean, that is my personal opinion.
Now, you are with Customs the last line of formal interception of individuals coming into this country. Would you have a recommendation with respect to consular officers who are interviewing or who perhaps should be interviewing visa applicants in terms of training for and providing techniques for interviews in order to make determinations on the other end of the journey, on the start end of the journey, rather than on the very last point at which an individual could be refused entry?
My recommendation on that regard would be that we should receive the same type of training as far as of interviewing techniques And we should know what the counselor is asking this person abroad so we can continue perhaps in a different line of question to ensure that this person have obtained the visa through the proper, say legally, all right? Because sometimes we have people that go through the embassy, get their visa, and then we have determined through the line of question that the visa was obtained through fraud, that the guy didn't have what it was necessary, required in order to obtain that visa. And then will be our job to turn those people back.
And finally, let me ask you, Officer Melendez, about the documentation for one of the hijackers who did successfully enter and re-enter the United States, Mohammed Atta. Our staff has shown you the documents relating to Mr. Atta's entry into the United States and had asked for your view in hindsight, but trying to put yourself in the present moment, looking at an individual who presented himself with the documents that Mr. Atta presented when he entered the United States in 2001. And what did you conclude?
Well, based on the guidance from the law, the person coming in to be as a student, he must be in possession of a M1 or F1 visa. When he presented himself to the primary inspector without the proper document, that was ground to be recommended refusal. I would have recommended refusal to my supervisor. He was not in possession of the right visa.
And can you explain that?
Well, the person is coming to the United States as a student must get an I-20, take it to the embassy, and get the proper visa. If the person, for example, come to the United States as a prospective student, he will come with a B1 or B2, B1, which will be a business, or B2 will be a visitor for pleasure, find the school of his choice, and if he's accepted, he will submit a change of status. When the person is in the United States, if the status is approved, the change of status is approved, he won't need the visa. He only needs the form, the action form that is sent for the service center, and he will go ahead and continue his studies. However, once the person departs the United States, if he's coming back to resume his studies, he must have the proper visa, which means that he must take the I-20 from the particular school, go to the embassy, and obtain the proper visa. If the person failed to do that, then he's not in possession of the right visa. So he could be denied by reg entry to the United States.
So in summary, is it your view that because he presented himself with an inappropriate visa, that he somehow talked his way into the United States despite the fact that his papers were not in order?
It is possible. That's my perception because he didn't have the document.
And if Mr. Atta on the spot had said, well, never mind about that, let me just come in as a tourist, what would have happened with respect to that?
He presented himself as a student. He must have proved that he was a student. He cannot change the reason that he's coming to the United States after he made the initial presentation to the primary inspector.
Was there any other characteristic about Mr. Atta, such as his age, that would have influenced you?
Well, his age and traveling by himself. Normally, a person traveling by himself, coming to this country, normally is coming on business. Most of the time, persons coming by themselves, I can say a good percentage of the time, they are come with their families when they are come to vacationing. Remember that normally, in my case, Orlando International, normally all those people are coming to go to the attractions. So that automatically will raise a flag if the person is coming by himself with a B2 as a visitor. Unless the family is already here, because that happens sometimes. The family came a few days prior and the person is going to meet his family. But a male traveling by himself, no, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions, only because of the time, and I know we have much to do. But again, I want to thank Mr. Melendez from all of us and for a grateful nation for an individual using his common sense and his skills, doing his job in a way that makes us all proud.